I am a voting member of this committee, and I have been working on this since October of last year. As I think many of us, done a ton of research, had conversations with all the entities, numerous conversations, and so I'll just kind of start backwards from where the conversation was as I prepare to vote today, which is one that I don't consider this to be an adequate or appropriate public process for two reasons. It's not just about the number of meetings, it's about the content. To my knowledge, there was not a single meeting held about this transaction until after it was decided that both parties wanted to do it. To me, that is different than saying we're contemplating this. What do folks think? What are the options? What do folks value? Do folks value access to athletic fields? You know, so the question is, and I've shared, and I think that one of the obligations we have as public servants and just as good citizens isn't just to criticize, but it's also to say what is an alternative. And I have provided very detailed comparisons between this and the Children's Museum transaction, of which, in this transaction, I was first informed of it by constituents. My first letter from the department came 6 to 8 weeks after I was, in communication with departments and entities about it. And that is not the best we can do. We can do better, and I've shared a very detailed list of how we can do better in terms of, comparing frequent and early briefings, frequent and early conversations when a transaction is contemplated to get input into whether or not it meets the needs of all the parties that are going to be impacted. The question is, am I ready to stand in the way of this transaction because of that, right? Am I willing to, punish or to send a message by voting against this? I'm not sure I'm there on this piece, so I then have to go to the other pieces. So I have a high expectation, and I have dedicated my time with Parks and with others to raise our expectations as a body about how we, as members of this council, are communicated with and how members of our community are communicated with. So I then have to look to some of the substantive concerns, and I will not be here on first reading, if this should make it out of committee and if this should pass. So I'm going to speak a little longer than I might ordinarily because I just want to go through some of the things that folks have raised today so that they know their concerns have been researched, because not all of them have been talked about. But I think that one of the things that I certainly have researched thoroughly, I don't agree with the biology assessments that were done by Parks. Numerous independent wildlife biologists, ecologists, and others have examined, and I just want to hold up the map. The larger an open space, the larger a habitat area, the more successful it will be for the species in using it. It is not true to say that because this area is degraded or unimproved or unrestored, it does not have biological value. That's just not a widely accepted tenet. And I would hesitate to find an independent environmental expert outside the city that would say that the size of the open space has no impact on the integrity of it. So I would not, if the vote before this body were to de-designate this natural area, I would not be able to support it, because it doesn't, in my mind, meet the science test. So once again, then, I'm stuck with, is that enough? So the charter doesn't give me the power to vote on de-designation. So that's not the vote before me. Do I vote on this transaction based on something I'm uncomfortable with to send a message to, I then have to go to the other issues, and there are many things folks have raised, some of which I think have been satisfied. The fact that there is a covenant here. I am bothered by the fact there is not a reversion clause for the city to take back possession and ownership of this site. I could not and I would not vote for this transaction unless at the end of the 40 years the city gets a right of first refusal. So that's, for me, I'll just throw that out there for the committee to think about. But so here I am at the end of these considerations, deeply unhappy with the way we handled this and deeply unhappy with the science and the biology that we used to justify our decision. Am I willing to vote against the transaction moving forward? I can't do that today. I started my career working, I've spent 3 years of my life working with women in domestic violence situations, as they went through criminal and civil court systems. This was more than 15 years ago. It wasn't in this state. I have had clients murdered who went through court systems that failed them because there are gaps in our system. And this project, I think there might be alternatives, but I cannot say today I know what that alternative would be. I cannot say. I've researched it. I've tried to find what the alternative school site would be. I've tried to find, what the alternative mechanism can be. And so, again, I feel like we have an obligation, which is, I think there are some cases, like, I think recently some of my colleagues made a very hard decision about a particular retail tenant and saying, we're going to say no because we really want the administration and the parties involved to find another path. And they have done that, and we sometimes rise to that occasion. The consequences of making that kind of decision in this case, to me, are bigger, which is that if I don't have that alternative and I don't know that it's there, I'm not sure that I can say no. So what I know right now is that I cannot say no to this transaction today, but that I would not be able to say yes to it without the city being first in line to get this land back. And so I'll stop there, and I want to listen to what my colleagues have to say. But
okay. Let me then go to the business order. This must be from a voting member of the committee. Do I have a person who's willing to make a motion?
I will.
Okay.
That we move this out of committee. Madam Chair.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further comments from committee? Please call the roll. Oh,
if I may, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilman Herman.
I truly don't believe that there's a such thing as a win-win, especially in this case, because there is some loss, and I think it's fair that we acknowledge that. Public, as we've done several things within this body for 20 months. We talk about public process. I think about redistricting, the effort that we were made, and they were still told that we didn't do enough or that it was secretive when we talk about maps. And there's no perfect public policy or public process, I think. And so I asked the question, do I feel that there was a sincere, because I think the key word is sincere effort to make sure that as many parties as possible are aware. But there are discussions that are behind doors. We do that in council, and I think that is fair. And so there were some discussions about that, and in this process that I don't think is entirely wrong, because I do think Councilwoman Lehman on several occasions made the effort to reach out. And as Councilwoman Kniech said, though we do have some concerns about it not being perfect, what is the greater good? And I certainly think, and Councilwoman Kniech's comments were much more eloquent than mine talking about domestic violence and women. I think it's wise that we do move this forward and continue to have a discussion should this pass. So, thank you.
Councilwoman Ortega.
I'll be very brief. I want to follow up with the additional questions I have that this process has raised. So I am not comfortable voting it out of committee today, so I'm going to be a no vote on that. But in the interim, I will send my questions out and hopefully get them responded to by first reading, assuming that the votes are here to move this forward today.
Okay. Councilwoman Robb.
I know I'm not a voting member of the committee, but just in response to Councilman Herndon, yeah, it's always a question of how much process is enough process. I have been faulted for maybe being process obsessive. But at the same time, I believe, and actually put out an alternative, was told, the response was, well, we couldn't trade that piece of property, not trade, but sell that piece of property and use cash to buy this building from the schools because that would take 2 years. However, I know this discussion has gone on for quite a while. So we've gotten to a point where in other parks decisions where we've considered swaps or putting buildings in parks, we've often been able to create some alternatives. We weren't able to do that here.
Please call the roll.
Brown.
Aye.
Herndon.
Aye.
Kniech.
pass.
Ortega.
No.
Sussman.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Wait a minute. We're not finished yet. We had a pass, and I get to vote.
Saving you for last.
Aye. And we have to go back to Kniech.
Abstain.
Okay, we have 4, 1, and 1 then as the vote. It's declared passed and on its way. I thank all of you, committee members, for working with me on moving this forward. And I thank all the people who have come today to give their opinions and to be part of the process.